Readings from Sri Aurobindo on the Triple Transformation, from Psychicization to Spiritualization to Supramentalization. The fundamental realizations of this yoga are: 1. The psychic change, so that a complete devotion can be the main motive of the heart and the ruler of thought, life, and action, in constant union with the Mother and in her presence. 2. The descent of the peace, power, light, etc., of the higher consciousness through the head and heart into the whole being, occupying the very cells of the body. 3. The perception of the One and Divine infinitely everywhere, the Mother everywhere, and living in that infinite consciousness. The psychic being stands behind the heart, supporting the mind, life, and body. In the psychic transformation, there are three main elements. 1. The opening of the occult inner mind, inner vital, inner physical, so that one becomes aware of all that lies behind the surface mind, life, and body. 2. The opening of the psychic being or soul, by which it comes forward and governs the mind, life, and body, turning all to the divine. 3. The opening of the whole lower being to the spiritual truth. This last may be called the psycho-spiritual part of the change. It is quite possible for the psychic transformation to take one beyond the individual, into the cosmic. Even the occult opening establishes a connection with the cosmic mind, cosmic vital, cosmic physical. The psychic realizes the contact with all existence, the oneness of the self, the universal love, and other realizations which lead to the cosmic consciousness. But all that is a result of the opening to the spiritual above, and it comes by an infiltration or reflection of the spiritual light and truth in mind, life, and body. The spiritual transformation proper begins or becomes possible when one rises above the mind and lives there, governing all from above. Even in the psychic transformation, one can rise above by a sort of going above of the mental, vital, physical being, and a return. But one does not yet live above in the summit consciousness, where overmind has its seat with the other planes that are above the human mind. The supramental transformation can only come when the lid between the lower and higher hemispheres or halves of existence is removed, and the supermind, instead of the overmind, becomes the governing power of the existence. But of that nothing can be spoken now. The soul, the psychic being, is in direct touch with the divine truth, but it is hidden in man by the mind, the vital being, and the physical nature. One may practice yoga and get illuminations in the mind and the reason. One may conquer power and luxuriate in all kinds of experiences in the vital. One may establish even surprising physical cities. But if the true soul power behind does not manifest, if the psychic nature does not come into the front, nothing genuine has been done. In this yoga, the psychic being is that which opens the rest of the nature to the true supramental light, and finally to the supreme Ananda. Mind can open by itself to its own higher reaches. It can still itself and widen into the impersonal. It may, too, spiritualize itself in some kind of static liberation or nirvana. But the supramental cannot find a sufficient base in a spiritualized mind alone. If the inmost soul is awakened, if there is a new birth out of the mere mental, vital, and physical into the psychic consciousness, then this yoga can be done. Otherwise, by the sole power of the mind or any other part, it is impossible. If there is a refusal of the psychic new birth, a refusal to become the child new born from the mother, owing to attachment to intellectual knowledge or mental ideas or to some vital desire, then there will be a failure in the sadhana. There are 1,000 ways of approaching and realizing the divine, and each way has its own experiences, which have their own truth, and stand really on a basis, one in essence, but complex in aspects, common to all, but not expressed in the same way by all. There is not much use in discussing these variations. The important thing is to follow one's own way well and thoroughly. In this yoga, one can realize the psychic being as a portion of the divine, seated in the heart with the divine supporting it there. This psychic being takes charge of the sadhana and turns the whole being to the truth and the divine, with results in the mind, the vital, the physical consciousness, which I need not go into here. That is a first transformation. We realize it next as the One Self, Brahman, divine, first above the body, life, mind, and not only within the heart supporting them, above and free and unattached as the static self, but also extended in wideness through the world as the silent self in all, and dynamic too as the active cosmic divine being and power, Ishvara Shakti, containing the world and pervading it as well as transcending it, manifesting all cosmic aspects. But what is most important for us is that it manifests as a transcending light, knowledge, power, purity, peace, ananda, of which we become aware above and which descends into the being and progressively replaces the ordinary consciousness by its own movements. That is the second transformation. We realize also the consciousness itself as moving upward, ascending through many planes, physical, vital, mental, overmental, to the supramental and ananda planes. This is nothing new. It is stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad that there are 5 Purushas, the physical, the vital, the mental, the truth Purusha, supramental, and the bliss Purusha. It says that one has to draw the physical self up into the vital into the mental into the truth self into the bliss self, and so attain perfection. But in this yoga, we become aware not only of this taking up, but of a pouring down of the powers of the higher self, so that there comes in the possibility of a descent of the supramental self and nature to dominate and change our present nature, and turn it from nature of ignorance into nature of truth knowledge, and through the supramental into nature of ananda. This is the third, or supramental, transformation. It does not always go in this order, for with many the spiritual descent begins first in an imperfect way, before the psychic is in front and in charge. But the psychic development has to be attained before a perfect and unhampered spiritual descent can take place. And the last, or supramental change, is impossible so long as the 2 first have not become full and complete. That's the whole matter. put as briefly as possible. In the spiritual knowledge of self, there are 3 steps of its self-achievement, which are at the same time 3 parts of the one knowledge. The first is the discovery of the soul, not the outer soul of thought and emotion and desire, but the secret psychic entity, the divine element within us. When that becomes dominant over the nature, when we are consciously the soul, and when mind, life, and body take their true place as its instruments, we are aware of a guide within that knows the truth, the good, the true delight and beauty of existence, controls heart and intellect by its luminous law, and leads our life and being towards spiritual completeness. Even within the obscure workings of the ignorance, we have then a witness who discerns, a living light that illumines, a will that refuses to be misled and separates the mind's truth from its error, the heart's intimate response from its vibrations to a wrong call and wrong demand upon it, the life's true ardor and plenitude of movement from vital passion and the turbid falsehoods of our vital nature and its dark self-seekings. This is the first step of self-realization, to enthrone the soul, the divine psychic individual, in the place of the ego. The next step is to become aware of the eternal self in us, unborn and one with the self of all beings. This self-realization liberates and universalizes. Even if our action still proceeds in the dynamics of the ignorance, it no longer binds or misleads, because our inner being is seated in the light of self-knowledge. The third step is to know the divine being, who is at once our supreme transcendent self, the cosmic being, foundation of our universality, and the divinity within of which our psychic being, the true evolving individual in our nature, is a portion, a spark, a flame growing into the eternal fire from which it was lit, and of which it is the witness ever living within us, and the conscious instrument of its light and power and joy and beauty. Aware of the divine as the master of our being and action, we can learn to become channels of his Shakti, the divine puissance, and act according to her dictates or her rule of light and power within us. Our action will not then be mastered by our vital impulse or governed by a mental standard, for she acts according to the permanent yet plastic truth of things, not that which the mind constructs, but the higher, deeper, and subtler truth of each movement and circumstance as it is known to the supreme knowledge and demanded by the supreme will in the universe. The liberation of the will follows upon the liberation in knowledge and is its dynamic consequence. It is knowledge that purifies. It is truth that liberates. Evil is the fruit of a spiritual ignorance, and it will disappear only by the growth of a spiritual consciousness and the light of spiritual knowledge. The division of our being from the being of others can only be healed by removing the divorce of our nature from the inner soul reality, by abolishing the veil between our becoming and our self-being, by bridging the remoteness of our individuality in nature from the divine being who is the omnipresent reality in nature and above nature. But this last division to be removed is the scission between this nature and the supernature, which is the self-power of the divine existence. even before the dynamic knowledge-ignorance is removed, while it still remains an inadequate instrumentation of the Spirit. The Supreme Shakti or Supernature can work through us, and we can be aware of her workings. But it is then by a modification of her light and power, so that it can be received and assimilated by the inferior nature of the mind, life, and body. But this is not enough. There is needed an entire remolding of what we are into a way and power of the divine supernature. The integration of our being cannot be complete unless there is this transformation of the dynamic action. There must be an uplifting and change of the whole mode of nature itself, and not only some illumination and transmutation of the inner ways of the being. An eternal truth consciousness must possess us, and sublimate all our natural modes into its own modes of being, knowledge, and action. A spontaneous truth awareness, truth will, truth feeling, truth movement, truth action can then become the integral law of our nature.